is Frank Honus, and I want to welcome you to the Pure Life Podcast. For 13 years of my life, I lived with so many secrets. I walked in guilt and shame over hidden struggles I hadn't told anyone about. Since the age of 13 years old, I had been addicted to pornography. So many times, I tried to stop looking at porn on my own, but I failed every time. It really wasn't until I experienced brokenness over my sin and sought the help of other men who had once struggled just like me. Today, it's by the grace of God that I'm walking in freedom and recovery. And just like those who helped me, it's my desire to help men and women break free from the chains of sexual addiction. The mission of the Pure Life Podcast is to help individuals live with sexual integrity through Jesus Christ. Thanks for listening and enjoy the podcast. Hey everyone, my name is Frank Honus, and I want to welcome you to episode 101 of the Pure Life Podcast. Thanks so much for watching and listening this week. Hope that you are having a victorious week, that you're having a week of purity and power, and that you're finding that you are becoming the man or woman that God's called you to be, a man and woman of purity. Appreciate you so much watching the podcast and supporting. This is the first episode back since vacation time, so I'm excited to be with you guys this week. And this is actually the first episode since episode 100, where I talked to my wife Tracy. I hope that was a very beneficial and encouraging podcast for you to listen to. I know I've received a lot of feedback on that, and just a lot of positive comments. Nothing from my wife and I that we necessarily added to, but just our story of just how good God has been to us and how faithful God has been in our marriage to heal me, to bring healing to my life of sexual addiction, and to bring healing to our marriage. So again, just so thankful that you can listen and watch this week on the podcast. This is the first episode after 100 episodes. So some things are going to be changing now, kind of a new format that I'm going to be following on the podcast. I hope you'll enjoy and appreciate. Going to kind of break up every single podcast into three parts: a purity resource, a purity topic, and a purity scripture. And I would like to kind of keep the podcast 15 to 20 minutes if possible, to value your time and to allow this to be a format that you can listen to and receive from, but not spend hours having to hit rewind and not super long episodes. So, but this week I'm excited to share with you kind of a new area that we've never covered, to kind of start a brand new discussion and a brand new conversation that I've never really delved into on the podcast before in 100 episodes in 2.5 years. And that is really thinking about the female side of sexual addiction and a whole list of things that go with that. But this week, I want to shift the conversation a little bit from us as sex addict, myself as a former sex addict, and us as men who struggle with sexual addiction. I want to turn the dial a little bit to our wives. And I know one of the things I've talked to guys about that they have so much trouble with doing, so many problems with, is just talking to their wife. How do I talk to my wife about my struggles? How do I talk to my wife about sexual addiction? How do I talk to my wife about how I'm doing and how I'm feeling? I mean, how do I start that conversation? Because it is hard. It is awkward. It's difficult initially if you're not used to, sharing with your spouse, having conversations with your spouse about your struggles. How do you do it? Where do you start? And let me first just say that I believe every single marriage needs to be one that's based on honesty, on openness, on transparency. And I really believe that every single guy, man or woman, every single woman needs to be able to talk to their husband or wife without shame and without guilt, and to allow that sense of openness to occur. And so I want to just share with you this week Actually, let me back up before we jump into that, because that's our purity topic of the week. 5 essential ingredients for healthy conversations with our spouses about sexual addiction. But before I even jump into that, I want to kick off the new format a little bit by sharing a purity resource with you, one that I'm aware of, and I think it will be hugely beneficial to you. So this week's purity resource comes from Be Broken Ministries. BeBroken.com is the website, and it is a 2-part audio series by Jonathan Doherty. Jonathan Doherty from Be Broken Ministries, who is the founder and head of that ministry. Fantastic guy who I'll actually be talking to soon here on the podcast, so you'll need to be listening for that interview coming up. Hopefully in September or so, we'll be talking to Jonathan. But he is in this series talking to a group of men at a purity retreat that Be Broken does about what it means to be a man of purity. And so there's some great information here, some great principles that you should really check out that I will be posting to the purelifepodcast.com website, following this episode as well. So check that out. That's a purity resource for this week. It's called Becoming a Man of Purity, 2-part audio series. This 2-part free audio series from Jonathan Doherty from Be Broken Ministry. So you can download that from my website, purelifepodcast.com. So check that out this week. All right, so back to the topic that we're going to talk about this week, which again is 5 essential ingredients. I like to call them ingredients because really no marriage can do without these things. These need to be a part of every healthy conversation that we have with our spouse, whether your spouse is your husband or your wife. Whoever is dealing with the sexual struggles needs to be able to talk to the other person. So these are things that I have learned. These are things that I have walked out and still walking out, continually learning. But the foundational ones here are ones that I are out of experience from my marriage and things that I am learning about and continue to learn about. So number 1 is the most important, and it's really what all the 2 through 2, 3, 4, and 5 are built on, and that is essentially honesty. Honesty. It all begins here, because see, what we're doing is we're letting our struggles, our addiction, our weakness, we're taking all of that stuff that has been in the darkness for so long, and we're letting it out into the light. There's no more hiding. There's no more secrets. We're getting that stuff out, and it begins here at honesty. It begins with being honest with manning up and being honest with your wife and letting it out, and it's hard to do. And if we think about it, in my marriage, and I know in many marriages, this is really what most wives want the most from their husbands. They don't want you to be perfect. They don't expect you to be perfect. They know you're not perfect, and this is not, a journey of perfection. This is a journey of honesty. And if I look back at my marriage, I see that my wife just simply wanted me to be honest with her. Obviously, expected my behavior to change, but honesty is what she was desiring from our marriage. And so, really, every communication with my wife, especially those, including those with sexual addiction, dealing with that have dealt with sexual addiction and continues with sexual purity, is built on honesty. There's no minimizing, there's no justifying, there's just openness. And so that is the place that you and I need to come to and need to be at, is a place of openness and a place of honesty. And so that is the first ingredient to every healthy conversation that we need to have with our wives, that we can have with our wives. The second one, number 2, is humility. Okay? Humility. And, you've screwed up, and it's no one else's fault, is really what it comes down to. You and I have made decisions to compromise our purity, we've made decisions to disgrace our family. Essentially, that's a hard truth, right? We've made decisions to compromise our character, all those things. And we've taken on a mindset that is not love, that is the opposite of love. It's almost abuse. And so we have to realize our sin. We have to realize the ways in which we've screwed up, and we can't blame anyone else. Humility is one of the most difficult things, I'll just be honest with you, that I struggle with in life. And I'm learning every day to try to get better and better with admitting my mistakes, admitting my faults, being humble with, before my wife. And so humility is where we have to start, realizing that this problem is bigger than you are and that you can't beat it alone. You can't beat it alone. You can't, beat sex addiction. You can't just stop. I mean, you might just stop looking at porn, but you can't run from this and do it by yourself. It's learning to lean on others for help. This is so crucial, so important in recovery is learning that you need to link arms with other guys, men. You need other men around you in your life, right? You can't beat this by yourself. And realizing too that, and I think this helps us, realizing that we're not alone. We're not alone. So if we realize we're not alone, we need to stop acting like we're alone and stop trying to beat this by ourselves. And so it takes humility, understanding that this problem is bigger than I am, and this addiction is stronger than I am, and I cannot beat it by myself. I can't do it alone. I need help. Number 3 is consistency. Okay, so we've got honesty, we've got humility, and now we've got consistency. And when you're able to establish honesty and you start to establish humility, you need to start establishing consistency. And that's learning to be truthful with your spouse, your husband, your wife, every day. And so just a real quick tip here for you is, why don't you try to think about developing a daily or weekly check-in with your spouse, where you tell them how you're doing. Obviously, if you looked at porn or if you masturbated, but it's a complete okay, this is how I'm doing, how you're feeling, what emotions you're feeling, you're struggling with that week, or how pulls, triggers, things like that. There needs to be a weekly kind of check-in conversation, and that needs to be proactive on your part, guys. That shouldn't be something your wife brings up every single week or whatever, every day. You need to bring that up. Honey, this is, okay, let's talk for a few minutes. Let's check in with each other. I'm feeling, this is how I'm feeling this week. This is how I'm doing. And this is time where she can pray for you, where she can encourage you, but you're allowing her into your world. You're allowing someone into your life, and you're not pushing people away. And, and this actual habit, this little habit itself, this little habit and this thing that you do, it breeds transparency and openness. The more you do it, the more you feel good doing it. You're able to do it. It's not a big deal. And, and it just breeds transparency, breeds openness. So consistency. The 4th one is sensitivity, gentlemen, guys, where, you can't just snap your fingers and your wife is totally fine with everything and healed. It's understanding the feelings of your wife. Understanding those feelings, trying to understand those feelings even, will go a long way in your marriage and will help you out big time. Being sensitive, and because you realize that think about this. You've just dropped a major bombshell on her. If this is the first time you sat down with your wife, or you're going to sit down with her for the first time to share your feelings with her, or even daily or weekly, right? You are sharing very, very, intimate details. You're sharing things that could potentially hurt her, okay? And it's the goal for you not to continue to hurt her, but you need to have this conversation. And so when that bombshell is dropped, it's a messy environment, right? It's a messy situation. And your wife, your husband, needs time to process. It needs time to really, adjust to all that and take all that information on and how they respond and whatnot. And so you need to realize that she has the right to be angry. She has the right to feel devastated, to be hurt, because you have messed up. You have sinned. You have hurt her. You have devastated your marriage. And so, you need to be very sensitive to her feelings. She's going to have days where she's triggered. You're going to have days where you're triggered. And it's learning to be sensitive to each other, but to be majorly be sensitive to her in conversation. Sensitivity is an area to really grow in that I still am growing in my marriage and understanding. But these are areas, ingredients, remember, that we need to have a part of a healthy conversation. When we talk to our wives about our sexual struggles and our addictions. And then the last one kind of goes along a little bit with sensitivity, but just a continual reminder is love. Okay? We need to remind our wives, guys, that we're never going to stop fighting for our marriage. That we'll never stop fighting for purity. that we'll never stop fighting to become the man that God's called us to be. And we'll never give up, because sex addiction is messy. Sexual struggles are hard. They're difficult to walk through. And we need to remind our wives that she's allowed to be triggered. She's allowed to be angry, like what you said. And so what's happening here is that we're developing a brand new love and a sense of communication that we never had before. And it's so cool to have that, to be able to have that with your wife, where there's no hiding, there's no question marks, there's no shame, there's no this tiptoe around each other kind of thing, that everything is out in the open. And everything is everything is transparent and honest. Now let me just be very clear and say that this is going to take time. It takes time to develop healthy conversations with each other. It takes time to develop, especially in this area where you are potentially coming out of a sexual addiction. I'm working with some men right now who are in that place where they're literally coming out of sexual addictions, and for the first time in their life, and it's a messy, painful, hurtful situation, and it's hard. It's hard for the husband, but it's incredibly, incredibly painful and hard for their wives. And so, and this is the story. This is how it goes. And so we want to do everything we can do to have a good conversation with our wife each and every day, or each and every week, or however you establish that. So those are just some thoughts to some ingredients that need to be part of your communication with your spouse, about your recovery, right? About your recovery journey, or about your sexual struggles, things that you're dealing with currently. But even in recovery, we need to be having these elements need to be part of our communication. So I hope you'll take those. If you missed them, hit the rewind button, go back and listen again. And I hope that they are a huge benefit to you. All right, wrapping up this week, episode 101, I want to share the purity scripture for you this week. This week's purity scripture comes from John chapter 1, verse 5. John chapter 1, verse 5 kind of really goes along with our topic today. It says, "The light shines in the darkness. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it." The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. When we allow our junk, we allow our struggles, we allow our sin, we allow our mistakes, the decisions we've made to enter the light, and we don't keep them hidden anymore, the secrets, then the light consumes the darkness, and there's nothing the darkness can do at that point but flee. And that is such a cool picture. I love how Scripture paints that to us, that we can live in the light, and we need to live in the light, and be men that truly walk in the light each and every day, and not be afraid to talk, not be afraid to talk to our wives, not be afraid to talk to our husbands, not be afraid of what people think of us. Because I don't know about you, but I want to do whatever I can do every day, even in the fifth year of my recovery, to be the man that God's called me to be, the man of sexual purity and integrity. So I hope you guys have a fantastic week. I hope that this is a week of victory for you. It's a week of purity for you. And if you need to contact me for any reason whatsoever, you have a question, a comment, a suggestion for the Pure Life Podcast, you can always email me, frank@purelifepodcast.com. That's frank@purelifepodcast.com. Of course, you know the website, purelifepodcast.com. We're on Twitter and Facebook, and you can listen through iTunes and Stitcher Radio and watch on YouTube, as well as the website. All sorts of ways to get a hold of me and touch base with us at purelifepodcast.com. So I hope you have a great week. Talk to you soon. Can't wait to come back next week for episode 102, which we will continue kind of exploring the female side of sexual addiction and what that means for our wives, and also the rise of female sex addiction and what that looks like in our culture. Have a great week. Wish you the best. God bless. Hey everyone, thanks for listening and watching the podcast this week. I want to encourage you to check out purelifepodcast.com. There's lots of great free resources, blogs, and podcasts from previous episodes to help you along with your journey through sexual purity. You can also check us out on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, and now watch the podcast on YouTube. Also find us on Twitter and Facebook, and if you need to email me or contact me with any questions, comments, or feedback, you can email me at frank@purelifepodcast.com. That's Frank at purelifepodcast.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the Pure Life Podcast.